There we go.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
That's too loud. Morning, Chris. All right, done scrambling. Try to get everything set. Hey, Luann and Martin and Timothy and Karen. Hey, Mona, Betsy. Hey, Tom. Oh, geez. I gotta get this,
The man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid band who purveys assorted rhythms all danceable in the urban room of the Congress
There we
Hotel
go.
in Chicago.
All right. Hey, Anne. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Rose. Hey, Denise. Hey, Sherry. Georgia. Hey, Aaron. Yes, Chris, I got off to a late start today. My hair's barely even dry. Hey, Susan. Hey, Bruce. Hey, Octavio. Yeah, it's pretty drenched out here, too. I hope I can get out of the neighborhood. Printer's Row went great. Hey, Ed. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Kelly. And Printer's Row run really well yesterday. I said it was the best, most movement they'd had. Hey, Heather. Oh, flooding. Good. That's all I need. I'll probably have to leave right after this. Maybe it'll have died down by then. Even got some leads on a Hawk book, so. Alexa, clear my notifications. Sorry if I just cleared all your notifications. David, yeah, I'll be in Naperville the 26th at Anderson's. Oh, look who's here. Yeah. Oh. Maureen, I don't know where your share button is, but please, if you can find it, do hit it. Good thing another Printer's Row today, huh? It's kind of an annual tradition that I get a monsoon every Printer's Row day. Hey, Laura. Hey, Laura. Good morning, everybody. Good for me to do this one this week, because I got some private gigs a private gig for an architecture company coming up in just a couple of weeks. And also, this gives me a chance to plug the afternoon. Oh, Kathy, there's always Adam today. But, I mean, the Sundays lately I've been doing things last second. You might maybe carried over from last October. Last fall we didn't have a lot of Sunday morning ones. I was busy in person. And rain is coming down pretty good outside, which probably means a small crowd at the bookstore later. But that's okay. That's okay. Ava, by all means, share away. I don't really see pictures in my comment feed. Yep, there's Miles. And Priya is back on the couch over there. All right, Bob. The Printer's Row was great yesterday. To say again I love you with all my heart. I'll just be talking about the Graceland Cemetery book over at Centuries and Slews today at 2 o'clock. Pam, I would appreciate that. There's plenty of other opportunities to see me coming up, though. Now, Sunday mornings have typically been full-length tours, so that's what I'm doing today. But lately I've been just doing where I decide what the full-length tour will be morning of, which is a little bit easier on me. And sometimes it'll be ones that don't usually get very good numbers. Watch out, guys. I'm going to push this up a little bit. To say again I love you with all my heart. Hey, Christina, Heather. But yeah, I would definitely not be working outdoors today. I did go for a walk earlier, and it was fairly pleasant outside. Yeah, Miles. Miles knows when I'm working at the computer. This has been kind of bad for him, really, that he knows that when the computer is out, that means it's time to go bother me. Morning, Bill. And yeah, it's Go Bears. I suppose. Are they still on? Well, they would be just starting now, I guess, huh? My Fantasy Dylan concert playlist, those would be weird. So you have to think, you're like, which songs would sound best today? Could I, like, walk in and it'd be the 1994 rehearsal of I Pity the Poor Immigrant that hasn't leaked yet? Can I just wander into the bitter end in 75? Nancy Obed Anderson's on the 26th. Yeah, I feel like the Bears have made up their mind that they're moving, but they also want a lot of our money to build this new complex. Like, make your own money, guys. Or get it from Arlington Heights. But Rich, I'm feeling fine. Ronnie and Aiden were fairly wiped out by their shots. Good morning, Mom. Harley, I imagine they do. We don't have that many vicious bears around here. Well, I could make a joke about Lakeview East or North Halstead. Awesome, Nancy. See you there. That'll kind of kick off Mystericon week in Anderson's bookshop on the 26th. Then I've also got a book library gig that week in like Villa Park. Yeah, the Omicron booster hit me harder than any of the previous shots have. We'll let Benny play another minute or so.
They all loved it. They
Morning,
all
Grandma
loved
Bell.
those bastards when they played by
But even with me, it was like weird congestion and
Rosetta.
some brain fog. But I'm pretty sure I'm over now. All right, well, we'll hope the power stays on here too. So I lose you guys just because it is dumping down rain outside right now. But all right, that'll do for Benny. I think it's time that we go ahead and get started. So welcome along, everybody. I am Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, not to mention the Smart Alex Guide to American History, Mysterious Chicago, H.H. Holmes, The True History, which TV shows repeatedly tell me they're using as a source and then interview me and clearly have not read at all. Murder Maps USA, new from Thames and Hudson, and Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, new from University of Illinois Press. Yesterday, when it was nice and dry outside, I was at their Printers Row tent for an hour or so. Thank you so much to the Mysterians who came out to see that. They were not really aware of the Mysterian thing at University of Illinois Press. So that was kind of a good thing to get to show off a little bit. Now, Graceland is generally known as the Cemetery of Architects, but when I do architecture tours at Graceland Cemetery, I don't typically highlight the architects too much because I feel as though it's only really meaningful to people to see an architect's grave if they're familiar with their building. So I'll be a couple of them as we pass, but most people don't know a Holabird and Root building off the top of their head or the difference between Holabird and Root or Holabird and Roche, but on these virtual tours, I can show some more examples. So we'll do a little bit more. This is also a plug. I will be talking about this book, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, at Centuries and Slews, the history and mystery bookstore out in Forest Park on Madison, not far from the Brown Cow Creamery, which is a really, really good ice cream parlor. So, yes, I am, in fact, incredibly famous, even turning down History Channel gigs lately. So, let's talk just briefly before we get going. We're going to talk a little bit about architectural styles. This is the old Federal Building where the Al Capone trial was and where Walt Disney came about 5 minutes from being blown up by the Black Hand in the 1910s. This is a style that we would call Beaux-Arts. That is the style French for beautiful arts. I've got it written out here, I believe. Yeah, Beaux-Arts, that is pronounced. I always feel weird pronouncing it like that, because if you don't know what it's spelled like, it's like bizarre architecture. But that was very popular and it kind of blended into the Field Museum, the neoclassical style with lots and lots of columns. That was very common in the late 19th, early 20th century. Got a big boost from the World's Fair of 1893 because a lot of it was built like this. And other architectural styles were starting to emerge, but they were bringing in a lot of architects. This was a language that they all spoke, so they tended to stick with this one. Like we got the Marquette Building was coming up around the same time. That's what we call the Chicago School of Architecture. That is by Holabird and Roche. This is the Chicago Building, another one known as the Chicago School of Architecture. One of the things that you'd see a lot with those is those three-part windows that allowed more natural light to come in. We also had the Rookery Building, but then this moved on eventually to Art Deco. The architecture of the 1920s and 30s, the Jazz Age, with the clean lines, streamlined verticality. We just did a whole tour about these, so you probably all know about things like the Carbide and Carbon building. Now, gradually, we got to the point where these were seen as not clean enough, not quite stylish enough, due to dwindling resources after the Great Depression and World War II. So for a while, the idea was to make as much building as you could out of as little materials as you could. Simple and elegant, the idea was less is more. So then we had things like modernism. Lots and lots of plain black boxes, such as the old IBM building that is now the AMA building. After this, for a while, we had brutalism. Lots and lots of cement. And then we had postmodernism, which kind of combined a lot of the old styles. Like this, the United Building takes that old neoclassical style. Up around the top is like a postmodern, new for the 90s take on old rows of Greek columns and a Greek-style pediment roof. It's like you can see right through it when the light hits it just right. Like you're seeing the, like you're seeing the Parthenon up on a hill. Here's one by the same architect, Ricardo Bofill, the Citadel building. But this is postmodernism. This is when they decided modernism was a bore, brutalism is ugly. Let's mix up and do whatever the heck we want now. This is 311 South Wacker as a new for the 90s version of Gothic architecture. 190 North LaSalle is, very different style, but also still updated, and we consider this one postmodern. So that's sort of your basics. We're going to move right on in to one of our earliest architects. Now, we tended to call ourselves in Chicago the birthplace of the skyscraper because we were the first place to have a modern-style skyscraper with steel frame construction where you just built a skeleton for the building out of steel, which allowed us to build a whole lot taller. Now, it is said the guy who first pioneered that, William LeBaron-Jenny, got the idea when one day he walked in and saw that his wife had a bunch of books stacked up on a bird cage and had kind of like an apple falling on his head moment and realized, hey, that bird cage holds everything up. So here, this is fairly recent. He was cremated at Graceland Cemetery. His ashes were scattered around this vicinity where his wife is buried. He didn't have a specific marker himself. It was kind of the trend. People who bought places around the Eternal Silence statue generally probably did not want markers, which really, really bothers people whose ancestors are buried here sometimes. But recently, John Knotts, one of the trustees, a descendant of the Kranz family who I had lunch with about a couple of weeks ago, arranged to have a marker put here. You can kind of see the steel frame coming through here. But this is the home insurance building that he built. And his firm, Jenny and Mundy, also designed some monuments for the cemetery itself. Like right over here, this is the Lion Bench, the Lion family, who were mostly in commodities trading. Daring commodities trading. But also in taking great delight in ticking off Southerners who objected to them having Indian gentlemen staying at their house during the World's Fair. But this is their bench. And it attracted quite a lot of notice even when it was first built. It was featured in architectural magazines. So here we can kind of see what it looked like at the time, back when people would come to cemeteries much more to hang out than they're generally encouraged to now. Personally, I think we ought to do it more often. You can see this one is probably going to get cleaned up pretty soon. Graceland is undergoing a long process of getting all the monuments cleaned up. So this one will probably look like this again before too terribly long. Right now it kind of looks like this, but when they clean them, they do look about like this again. We're going to start with one of the most important ones, really, though. Just over on the island. Originally, this island in the pond was just made for a gazebo. They didn't intend to have any monuments on here. But in 1912, Daniel Burnham died. He was cremated, and his wife was able to arrange to use this island for their memorials. So there's no actual human full casket burials on here. These are all ashes that would be buried here. It wouldn't really take a full casket burial. But Daniel Burnham was the architect behind things like, besides the World's Fair, things like the Rookery building here in Chicago, one of my absolute favorites, which he did with his partner John Wilborn Root. Or off in New York, the Flatiron building, that's a Daniel Burnham as well. And for a long time, we didn't really think of him as an architect in Chicago. We thought of him more as a city planner because of his giant 1909 plan for the city of Chicago. He was a big thinker. He used to say, make no little plans, they have no magic in them to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high and hope and in work. And this is one of the happy little side effects of doing the Graceland Cemetery book, is that quote is all over Chicago. They painted on walls in tourist traps. But it was generally thought to be apocryphal. Us Chicago history guys used to kind of nudge each other in the ribs whenever somebody brought that one up. Go, yeah, maybe he said that. But while I was doing the research, I found the original speech where he said it. It turned out it was in 1910 in the UK. And there it was, word for word. Got my name in the paper on that one. Here's a nice shot of it with a snowman. See, this is not a person making big plans with the snowman. This is a person making little plans, and therefore ending up with not much of a snowman. Now, just next to Burnham are his sons, Daniel Jr. and Hubert. They're not quite as well known. They were also architects. I couldn't even find that many pictures of them. Like, this is one that came out of a passport. Here's the Clark Adams building, also known as the Bankers building that they designed. They're probably best known in Chicago for the Carbide and Carbon building. which I thought for years it was an urban legend that they wanted that to look like an Art Deco champagne bottle. But then somebody found it in the diary. There it is. Here's a good view of it from a rooftop bar aboard the top of the Virgin Hotel. Such a cool space. I love that it's green, too, the color of an old champagne bottle. Because, we're getting, especially nowadays, as we get more and more glass buildings in Chicago, even the really cool glass buildings, it's nice to have this splash of color that's a little bit different. Now, Burnham's partner, his main designer, the guy who did most of the design work, and a lot of these architects didn't really do a whole lot of designing themselves, honestly. But his partner was a guy by the name of John Welborn Root. He died fairly young of pneumonia while they were still working on the work. This is, on his monument is a design from one of his buildings, the Phoenix Building, which used to look like this. You can kind of see the idea of it right there. But here's Burnham and Root. We'll kind of match this up with the two buildings here so you can see what they're going with. Now, the monument itself was designed by Charles Bowler Atwood, the guy who replaced John Welborn Root, who was a brilliant designer and also kind of a party animal, always late for everything. When he first had a meeting scheduled with Burnham in New York, he was 3 hours late. Burnham just took off and went home. So Bowler Atwood just hopped on the next train and impressed Burnham so much with his designs when he got there that he really had no choice but to give him the job, and he ended up making dozens of buildings for Burnham and Root before dying of likely a drug overdose. But Root Jr., who was also in the plot, went on to form Holabird and Root, which became the rock stars of the Art Deco age. You can see here they are with the Board of Trade building, 333 North Michigan, or the Daily News building. There was also a guy in the firm for a while, Herman Lackner, who was also at Graceland Cemetery, just died in 1998. Designed a few monuments for the cemetery itself. He was a member of the firm there. Now, the other half of Holabird and Root was Mr. Holabird. Now, Holabird himself, Holabird's father, the original Mr. Holabird, had started out in William LeBaron Jennings' firm. But then he and Mr. Roche broke off for themselves to form Holabird and Roche and build things like the Marquette Building, which we just showed earlier on. This is one of the places we can trace Al Capone to. During his trial, he would go over to this building to have lunch at his lawyer's office. They also designed a lot of the Graceland buildings, such as the Graceland Chapel. But Holabird's son teamed up with Root's son to form Holabird and Root, which once again did things like the Board of Trade, 333 North Michigan, the rock stars of Art Deco. There's quite a few things just right around the vicinity of this. There's one other architect, Boyd Hill. Do I have him on here? Yeah, let's move up over to Boyd Hill. We'll skip up. We'll just walk up the plateau. It's the plateau that I like to call Pride Rock. It's where the coyotes like to hang out. Well, there's a guy up here who designed the Aragon Ballroom and the nearby Lawrence Hotel. It's an architect by the name of Boyd Hill. He was a cousin of Carolyn Kirkland, also known as Madam X, the gossip columnist for the Tribune, shown here with what can only be described, even on a Sunday morning, as a shit-eating grin. They're just up here on the plateau. They're kind of so he's one of the lesser-known architects. So there's Carolyn. And behind her, the architect Boyd Hill, who I just kind of stumbled across while going through Madam X's file at Graceland. There was this little note saying that the architect Boyd Hill in the plot was the guy who built the Aragon. Wouldn't have known otherwise. Well, let's go up around the pond. There are a couple of them up here by the firm of McKim, Mead, and White, who are much better known for their New York work. And of course, Stanford White turns up on our bad boys or villains of architecture tour sometimes. Now, a cool thing they got here is these 3D versions of the death's head that you see in like 18th century gravestones. Things like, the face with the wings. You see these in old gravestones. Here they're three-dimensional on the Honore family tomb. But McKim, Mead, and White are best known for things like the Washington the Arch in Washington Square Park or New York City Hall. They did a few of them here at Graceland Cemetery, including the Honores, And the Honore's daughter, Bertha Honore Palmer, who married Potter Palmer, and they have this entire Parthenon built for them by McKim, Mead, and White up over here. There's really very little McKim, Mead, and White stuff in Chicago, but most of what I know of is at Graceland Cemetery, other than one house by Stanford White. But one other by them is for the Chalmers family. There's an early picture of this that doesn't have the angel statue. That might have been a later addition. But these are the Kimballs of the Kimball Piano Company. I always thought that the way that the slabs were there kind of evoked piano keys. Whether that's intentional or not, I've never seen anything. The one that could definitely use some cleanup work, and probably will get it soon. Right behind them is Louis Sullivan, an architect himself. Started out working for Frank Lloyd Wright, branched off to develop really a distinct style of his own. You can't see it that well on the picture here, but you can see on the side there's like a skyline carved into the side of this. It's really very cool. Now, when he died initially, he was unmarked. He was deeply in debt and way out of style at the time of his death in the 1920s. But he had made a name for himself designing things like, this is one of his last one, the Krause Music Store in Lincoln Square. And this Jewel Box Bank in Grinnell, Iowa, where Grandma Bell, who was out there today, was talking a while, was used to bank years and years ago. But Sullivan also designed a couple of mausoleums in the cemetery. And in fact, this one, the Getty Mausoleum, is maybe the best example of his style that you can find. Everything we associate with Sullivan here, the arches, the ornamentation, the layering, it is all right there. He also, however, did the Ryerson Mausoleum, which is over by the Schoenhofen Pyramid and Mr. Pullman, keeping an eye on Mr. Pullman. But this is very atypical of Sullivan's style. This is an Egyptian revival. It's got the pyramid on top as the obvious part, but the lower part is an Egyptian mastaba style tomb. Inside of this, I'll just show you really quickly. There's a really spooky bust of him on the inside of this. Now, I wish I could show you guys more like the key cabinet and stuff. Some of the keys in this place look like something out of Scooby-Doo. I'll do a TikTok about it sooner or later and just leave off the names of the cemeteries and the mausoleums. Now, there's this other one here that is sometimes said to be a Sullivan, Mr. Boldenweck. It is probably not really Sullivan unless he was being really sneaky about it. It's more likely an imitator. But also next to it is another that has occasionally been said to be a possible Sullivan, but was actually probably designed by the guy who's inside of it, a guy by the name of Gustav Wilk, who was more of a contractor than an architect, at least officially, probably best known for his work on the Texas State Capitol, made out of all this pink granite. The thing is, the guy who was actually the architect flaked out, and Wilk ended up having to do most of the work on it himself. Legend has it he not only designed his mausoleum, but used granite from the same quarry, or perhaps even leftover granite from the Texas State Capitol, to build his mausoleum. It was built years before he actually needed it. You see that quite a bit, that people build themselves monuments years before they're actually in use. Which, helps. Like Richard Dreyhaus has got a mausoleum being built at Graceland. As I understand it, there's a couple of different firms submitting competing designs for what it's going to look like. And of course, he liked really fancy stuff. He would have loved helping to design his own mausoleum. But people I met with a couple of weeks ago who knew him said, yeah, I don't think he didn't know he was going to die. And I don't mean he didn't know he was going to die this year. He didn't seem to realize that he was eventually going to die. By all accounts, Dreyhaus was just like a big kid. We'll move over here a bit for another architect whose firm designed his monument. This is Sheldon Anderson of Graham Anderson, Probst and White. If you ride by on the red line, this is the one that you can see most clearly as you pass. And his name, you really have to go looking for. It's like underneath his neck, his name is carved in, and just in small letters. But Graham Anderson, Probst and White did a lot of both Beaux-Arts and Art Deco stuff in the 1920s and 1930s. Here's the merchandise mart that they did in 1930. We'll get a good angle of it eventually here. And of course, the Wrigley Building, 1920. The Civic Opera Building, here's a picture by Eric Alex Rogers. And right next to that, until recently, was one of the ones that they made 25 years after that, they made this thing. How the times change. You look at all this corrugated metal all over the General Growth Properties building here. Some of the corrugated metal has actually been worked into the design down below on the Riverwalk, below the new building that has been built where this one used to be. So keep your eyes peeled. Look at the corrugated metal when you come on the boat tour in a few weeks. Just check it out. You'll notice it. I'll probably point it out. Honestly, I still haven't figured out what to talk about at the new building in this place. It's, honestly, I liked this one better. It's not using the best and tallest possible use of the space, but it's just so different from everything else on the river. I like that about it. Graham Anderson Probst and White also did the Chalmers Monument here at Graceland Cemetery. Burial place of Super Nintendo Chalmers. Now, Mr. Chalmers actually was a superintendent of something. But next to them is Lars Hallberg, who should be a little bit better known than he is, just because there are various architects who are known only from the boat tours. Like Ralph Johnson, who I mentioned twice every tour, just said in an interview that people mostly know him from the boat tours. Lars Hallberg designed this building called the Chicago School that is it was originally the Chase and Sanborn Coffee Warehouse. It's probably the best example of the Chicago School of Architecture, this commercial style of the late 19th, early 20th century that still survives on the Chicago River. It even says the Chicago School on it. It's not a reference to the architecture. There's like a Chicago School of Psychiatry in there. So that's just a nice little coincidence. Another one that John Knotts was responsible for getting recognition for here, or getting a marker for, is up here in the Columbarium. It's probably the most prominent woman architect at Graceland, the first woman to be licensed as an architect in Illinois. So over here in the Columbarium is Marion Mahoney Griffin. And people who are really familiar with the work usually pronounce it Mahoney. I always get emails saying it should be Mahoney, but then no matter how I pronounce it, somebody wants to correct me. It's Barbara Langthot right next to her, who is the who wrote a book about who wrote the architecture books pamphlet or book about this area. But Mary Mahoney Griffin, 1871 to 1961, worked in Frank Lloyd Wright's office and is probably best known now for doing the paintings of his works that look like Japanese landscapes. It was really these paintings that made Frank Lloyd Wright famous in the first place. Things like this. She was the one who did a lot of these paintings. Her name wasn't signed on a lot of them. She really preferred to work more in the background. Even after she married Walter Burley Griffin, became Mary Mahoney Griffin, became one of the biggest architecture husband and wife teams in the country. Also worked with Richard Bach, who did things like, who also worked with Frank Lloyd Wright, doing things like that building down in Hyde Park, or the Fisher Columbarium here. Now, she did not have nice things to say about Frank Lloyd Wright. In her book, she doesn't name names, but she referred to somebody as a canker sore, who originated very little but spent most of his time claiming everything and swiping everything, whose vanity and malice killed the so-called Chicago movement. Not naming names, but also not mincing words. Check out a couple of the other little known ones that I think some people would just go nuts knowing about this. Right over here is Dwight Perkins, architect probably best known for schools and public buildings, perhaps most famously in Chicago, Lane Tech High School. If you want to know that Lane Tech is a great high school, stand next to somebody who went there 50 years ago for about more than 5 minutes, and they'll probably bring it up. Much to their chagrin, though, he also designed their hated rival school, Carl Schurz, which I think is a much more innovative design. It's kind of a prairie school vibe, whereas Lane Tech is really just impersonating colleges of the day. But also designed in the prairie school style, the Cafe Brower, at where the haunted history tours are going to be starting and ending this coming October, Tuesdays and Wednesdays in October. Quick plug there. A couple others will just move over here a bit. I should probably speed this one up some. That's kind of a hike. It's another prairie school design for the radical anarchist Ernst Schmidt. But this monument was designed by his son, Richard Schmidt, who is better known around Chicago for mostly doing large houses such as the Wrigley Mansion. This is over in the Lincoln Park area. This is built for it's built originally from a guy named Mr. Teal, who was a partner in the Schoenhofen brewing business. Eventually, William Wrigley Jr. moved in, guy whose name is on Wrigley Field and the Wrigley Building. But Schmidt had also done things like Schoenhofen breweries that are still standing, and perhaps most notably of all, the Schoenhofen Pyramid at Graceland Cemetery. This is another Richard Schmidt design. One guy, I've been researching this guy a bit without realizing that he was even an architect himself. This is a statue for Frederick Wolfe, who I knew as a builder and contractor more than an architect. And this is kind of an interesting statue. Usually statues are pointing upward in cemeteries, pointing upwards towards heaven. Seeing one of them walking down is a little bit jarring. But he did do a few things as an architect around Chicago. He did the Anna Wolf House that stands in the Gold Coast, but probably better known for breweries and ice houses around Milwaukee, some of which are still standing. Move up the road from him a bit. This is Howard Vander and Shaw. Now this one, it's the 23rd Psalm on what appears to be like an old Selectric typewriter ball. I imagine Vander and Shaw probably designed this for himself. This is Howard Vander and Shaw, who is probably best known in his time for designing houses. He has stuff all over Lakeview still standing, but perhaps most notably Market Square in Lake Forest, not Lakeview. This was by most accounts, the first planned shopping center up in Lake Forest. It's a Howard Vander and Shaw design, and still, I think, unequaled as a shopping center. We've tried to broadcast from here a couple of times, but it's something about Lake Forest. Cell signal is bad up here. I can never live stream properly. We also sometimes cover his daughter, Sylvia Shaw Judson, who is also in the plot with him. She was a sculptor. But we're on architects today. Now, Shaw also designed this whole mausoleum for the Goodman family, who were primarily a lumber family. Their son Kenneth was a playwright. After his death from the 1918 pandemic during World War I, they arranged to start the Goodman Theater in his honor. We'll walk around to the front of this. This one actually goes right up against the water. We're going to carefully walk down here. So it's made to go up against the water. It's supposed to look as though you have to sail a coffin up to it. Yeah, this is the Goodman family mausoleum, designed by Howard Vander and Shaw. Let's take a quick look across. Just got a quick look at Solon Beeman's design for the Pullman column. But yeah, right across from here, there's a wider view of it. Looking across the lake at the marker for Bruce Goff, just fairly recently. He died in the early 1980s. It was a while before they actually added a marker for him. His admirers had gotten together. Goff was a fascinating architect to me. He's one of my favorites, because I love oddball architecture. And Goff was particularly adept at that kind of thing. He designed, while other people were designing Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's plain black rectangles, he was designing places like this. Or like this. I don't know how functional they were, but... Or here in Andersonville, he did the Myron Bachman House, which is a guy who's been restoring. This was originally an 1890s building that he completely revamped. Got to start doing things like the international style, Tupelo International, but he was working when he was very, very young. This was a style that kind of came around the same time as modernism, which... International school is kind of like modernism, but making more of a fetish of the structure, really showing all of the bones of the building and using that as ornamentation. Goff used to say, of course structure can be beautiful. A human skeleton is beautiful, but do you want to shake hands with it? He didn't really like designing buildings quite like that. So he would instead design like this. But right beside him, really, is the guy we most associate with those plain black rectangle modernist buildings, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who is buried underneath a plain black rectangle. The most appropriate monument in the cemetery. One of his buildings, or even more of them over at Federal Plaza. And one of the more recent burials there, I don't even have quite an updated version of the monument. There's a rock garden around this now. But this is a recent interment here for Stanley Tigerman. He's an architect with a great sense of humor. Well, later in his life, he said, I was reading back through my old interviews and like, wow, I've got a real problem with swearing. And here's Tigerman. There's a story that he won a beautiful baby contest in the 1933 World's Fair. I could not find anything to back this up after looking up stuff about baby contests at the World's Fair. But doesn't he just look like he would have won a beautiful baby contest? He could have entered it the day this picture was taken and probably would have won a beautiful baby contest. Well, he did things like he started out doing very simple buildings like the Boardwalk Apartments that you can actually, and this one, kind of more international style, you can actually see these from Graceland Cemetery. On days when the leaves are down, you can actually, from his monument, see some of his architecture. But eventually he got into doing wilder stuff, kind of rejected the old style modernism and did things like the Animal Crackers House in Highland Park. I should really go film this one sometime. It's kind of a drive up to there. But also in Skokie, the Holocaust Museum, which even here has a lot of little touches in it, like things like you've got the darkness and the lightness, you've got the image of the rising sun, and a lot of little humorous touches that really he said that were very specifically to irk the Nazis. Everybody hates Illinois Nazis. A lot of little touches like that in there. Now, in one of these buildings, one of the buildings linked below, I think the Boardwalk Apartments, is a mural of him that I haven't quite been able to get to, but I just actually spoke to the reporter who interviewed him for this, who is quoted in the book, and he's got a, they asked him about the future. He said, I know exactly where my future lies. Graceland Cemetery. Just like all of the other architects. It really has been a popular thing these days for architects to get themselves, even if they're not buried here, get a monument at Graceland Cemetery. Here's one for Walter Netsch, who designed University Hall over University of Illinois campus. And just up the ways from him, just past Featherstone and Hyde, Mr. Featherstone manufactured bicycles, sold bicycles and velocipedes. This is Fazlur Khan and Bruce Graham, an architecture and engineer. Fazlur Khan was known as the Einstein of structural engineering. They're probably best known for the Sears Tower. You know, little known building here in Chicago. It's pretty tall. Just over from them. Now, the Bruce Graham one especially tends to look at its best when it's been raining lately. But near them are markers, or I think these might be just cenotaphs, for Jacques Brownson, perhaps best known for the Daly Center, and Stanislaw Gladek, who in Chicago is best known for the swooping Chase Tower. Honestly, I love this one. It's simple, but I love it. And perhaps less well regarded for the FBI headquarters. Now, all of a sudden, it is popular to like brutalism again. I never thought that would happen, but all of a sudden, the last few years, I've been seeing a lot more people unironically claim to love brutalism. After years when it was the butt of every architecture joke. It's like the neon fanny pack that I thought that I wouldn't have been caught dead with in 1992 is suddenly the coolest thing in my wardrobe again. So, here we are. And one other person to point out here is this little pyramid for Richard Nickel, who was an architectural photographer who actually would poke around these old decaying buildings just trying to get them documented. Unfortunately, he died in an accident inside of one of them. But he took pictures like photographs of a lost city. He's very popular among architectural photographers. Sometimes we've used some of his work around here. A lot of buildings, the only shots we have of the interior, the only indications of what they might have been like, are pictures that Richard Nickel was able to sneak in and pick. People like to leave nickels on his stone. Obvious reasons. But all right. This is a shorter one today, but I got to plug the upcoming stuff. So on Thursday night, we will be back with another virtual time travel pub crawl. It's been a good literary week. I got a couple of bookstore events this week, so why not this week we'll do the time travel pub crawl literary haunts, places like the Mermaid Tavern, probably the Gaslight Cafe in New York. Places where literary types used to hang out. We've only done this one once before, and it was like 2 years ago, so I'm looking forward to doing that again. See how well I can rebuild it. Then in person, once again today, 2 p.m. If you're not completely flooded in, and it looks like the rain has stopped over here. Hop on down to Centuries and Slews on West Madison and Forest Park. I'll be there at 2 p.m. It's going to be pretty cool. And Friday night, we got Architecture of Mysterious Chicago. Saturday morning, Rose Hill Cemetery. And then in just a few weeks, Mystericon comes up. If you are not in the Mysterious Chicago Regulars page, Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club, join that. They can link you to all of the events that we'll be doing over the course of that weekend. I'll be running tours. Mandy and Layla from Effing Chicago and Patty from Effing Chicago are going to be running tours. We'll have free events at the Palmer House. It is going to be fun. Great reason to come to Chicago, and it's not too late to change your plans if you weren't planning on it. And with that, everybody, well, quick plug for other stuff. Mystericon 2022 is coming right up. What is that here? How did I have this one in here? I haven't done Graceland Architects in a long time. How did I have the Mystericon 2022 graphic in there? It's a mystery. Should you need a t-shirt or something, go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. They will hook you up right there. And with that, I will put the Benny Goodman back on, and we'll just hang out for a bit. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Another Sunday morning. Yes, and thanks to everybody who is joining the Patreon, hitting me up on the Venmo or the PayPal. Yes, if you can mark it as for a friend, that kind of helps. When I inevitably get that email from the IRS, or the letter. I'm Ben Ma, Lisa. There's a whole other group now? I don't know about the other groups. Whatever it takes. Kristen, here. I tested into a lot of stuff, and standardized testing really only measures how well you take standardized tests. Fortunately for me, I'm pretty good at it. Much better than I was at any kind of other regular studies. Should I eat lunch before I go or later? Or on the way? Nice, Carolyn, Arizona. How to do top flight research? I just kind of learned as I went, honestly. All from a deep inner desire not to have anybody fact check me without me being ready to defend my choices. Where is Miles? He was here. Oh, he's over on the green chair right now. He popped in a bit this morning. Priya's on the couch back behind him there. You can see both of the cats. Thanks, Tina. Deb, you know, there are actually a couple of Boldenweck mausoleums. I think the one I was pointing out there was Lewis. There's another one nearby. Oh no, did I start fights between the Shirts people and the Lane Tech people? That doesn't take much to start fights between those two groups. Like, you'll see guys in the nursing homes having fights. And like, dude, high school was a long time ago, guys. I don't know, it's strange for me having generally lacked school spirit. I went to South Gwinnett High School. Rip on us all you want. I will not contradict you. I will not be true to my school. I will also not be Mike Love and be 80 years old and go on stage and talk about the cheerleaders. Yeah, the cheerleaders. Before playing Be True to Your School and splashing the names of all the local schools on a screen.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang.
Even on the reunion tour where there were actual Beach Boys besides him. Where you're not seeing like the Beach Boys of Theseus. Nice, Georgia. Oh, RLA, my degree is in English. Yeah, I got some formal training in history stuff and some formal training in art stuff. Mostly I have learned as I go. Shark, let me go see if there's any sharks outside. Not just some receding puddles. Yeah, people would ask, what are you going to do with a BA in English? Well, here you are. What are you going to do with a BA and what are you going to do with an MBA? You know, go read all the job postings when I got out of college. See how many people were concerned what your degree was in. They wanted 6 years of experience. For coding in languages that had only existed for 2 years. I'm sure there's coyotes in the South Loop all the time. You just don't always see them.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
Oh, thank you, Donna. Thanks to everybody who's kicking in on the Venmo, the Patreon. Joining the Patreon is the best bang for buck. It's going to be an especially cool story there this week. And we'll cover it on the mini tours as well. Maybe 2 or 3 times. It even ties in to the building where Larry and Balky lived on Perfect Strangers. Did you know that that was a disorderly house at one time? I gotta check and see if it's the same building. I don't know when that one was built offhand. But I'll look it up before I say anything. It looks like it would have been the right one. That's one of those things that somebody told me. You know that building they showed at the beginning of Perfect Strangers? That used to be a brothel. I'm like, yeah, sure. But no, it was. And you'll all hear the story this week. I'll be all into it. Truckin', Helen Ward. Yeah, Beth, I'm not sure if Perfect Strangers is on anything. It ought to be. I think it was for a while. It's amazing how many of the 80s sitcoms you can't get. Tina, Perfect Strangers, 1980s sitcom, into the early 90s. Larry and Balky. TGIF. Now, Katie, the class of 99 was good because it rhymed with a lot of things. Alright, I want to plug one more time before I go find myself some food. That's 2 p.m. today, just about 3 hours, Centuries and Slews in Forest Park. One of my favorite bookstores. I really love going to that place. That is also conveniently located next to a great ice cream place. So I will be over there in just a few hours at 2 p.m. to talk more about Graceland Cemetery, specifically about Graceland Cemetery, the book, which you can pick up there. And I'll also, unlike yesterday, I'll even be giving a little bit of a presentation there. So lots of great stuff coming up. We've also got Architecture of Mysterious Chicago, where you can see some of these buildings up close and hear who jumped out of the windows of them. Coming up on Friday night, we'll do a time travel virtual pub crawl literary science on September 15th. That's Thursday. Then Saturday morning, less than a week from today, Rose Hill Cemetery. So lots of stuff coming up. I'm generally telling myself I'm taking it easy this month. But stuff keeps on coming up because at the end of the month, October begins with Mystericon. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam. Thanks for joining me. I will see all of you, some of you I hope this afternoon, others over the course of the next week, and even more of you coming up in a few weeks for Mystericon. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. So try to stay dry. I will say one thing. Have you been watching TV news at all today? If you've been watching TV news at all today, it's been pretty much the same thing. And here's my impression of it. Every year they do the coffin races in Forest Park. So this is what TV news is about today, watching the Queen's coffin go. It's just kind of like this. There's some footage I got from the coffin races a few years ago. Also in Forest Park, where I'm heading in just a minute. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Yeah, do 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 do. All right, stay spooky, everybody. Have a great day.